And welcome back to the Rack Show, where we discuss everything involving the responsibly armed citizen. I am one of your hosts, Tim Kelly, and I'm with Frank Horvath, and we're going to be discussing firearm safety and etiquette. Why don't you take it off, Frank?
Well, hello, Tim. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Good. So first show was just a little shaky, right? Getting our feet out from underneath us. Got a little tongue-tied. New day, everything. We're feeling a little bit better. We're gonna roll right through this. I'm excited for it. All right. So yeah, firearms safety and etiquette. So what is firearm safety and etiquette? Why? I mean, obviously we're thinking about firearm safety. Let's not hurt somebody. But what does that actually mean? What does it actually look like? What are those fundamental firearm safety rules? And then we'll dive into etiquette after that. But what are those fundamental firearm safety rules?
Well, I think in the last show we talked about the folks that grew up around guns, right? The idea that I grew up around guns, and for some odd reason, especially us men, get offended when you start talking about firearm safety. Well, I already know how to safely handle a firearm.
Right.
Do you? And have you measured that to some type of success? Like, how have you measured that? And what type of environments have you been in to practice firearm safety? Right. And you think about practicing firearm safety, it's because it's a skill. It's not something that you inherited. It's not embedded in your DNA. Right. And just because your grandfather taught you how to shoot your rifle or something like that, doesn't mean that you know everything there is to know about firearm safety and how to apply it in multiple different formats.
Right.
So there's a lot that goes into firearm safety.
Something that immediately sticks in my brain is when I was a kid, right? Growing up, there was treat every firearm as if it was loaded. Fortunately, my parents had that foresight to say something like that, right. to teach it in that way. Same thing with keep your finger straight and off the trigger, and what does that actually look like? Like, so in my family growing up, that literally meant finger high out of the trigger guard, which just happens to coincide with what our expectation is for that particular firearm safety rule. But that's not the same. That's not universal for everybody. Right. So. One example that we have. So here we have a frame, right? This is just a piece for you guys joining us on the digital media side, right? So we have a frame, just a piece of plastic, so not a firearm, just a piece of plastic. But when we say finger straight off the trigger, I mean, if your finger is straight off trigger, but it's hovering right inside the trigger guard, right? Then I would consider that being pretty close to being on the trigger, right? We want to be able to see through that trigger guard. So again, if you're joining us on the live stream, you can see, if your finger's straight off the trigger, it's nice and high where your finger can touch the metal of the slide, like way above where there could be any excuse for any misconstrusion of where that might go, where that finger might go. But again, that's just one piece of it, right? So what else is there?
Well, keeping it pointed in a safe direction, not letting the muzzle of your firearm, the business end of your firearm to, cover anything you don't intend to shoot, kill, or destroy. Right. And I think that's probably the one that stands out to me the most. Now, the finger on the trigger thing, sure, we're all the time getting on the folks about that, but the keeping it pointed in a safe direction, a lot of times when there's a lapse or something like that, maybe like in a class, say a class or something, and an instructor is talking to another student, and another student standing on the line, and they just get lazy, and they just I take their gun and they just kind of put their hand over it like this, and the firearm is actually pointed at their feet, right? It's pointed right directly at their feet. It's so often overlooked, because people don't carry these things around and have them in their hands all of the time. Right. So just like being able to practice marksmanship skills or any other technical skill for that matter, you must be practicing firearms handling and safety.
Right. And that extends beyond the range.
Sure.
Right. That's literally everywhere. So going back to that, and keeping your firearm pointed in a safe direction, what helps dictate what that safe direction is? right? It depends, right? So if you're on a range, of course it's going to be downrange. It's going to be, pointed towards the ground, something like that. But let's say you live in an apartment complex. You're in a hotel, right? You're not on the ground floor. You're on the second floor. Pointing at the ground may not be a great idea.
Sure.
What's something that most hotels have, right? At least the budget hotels that I frequent. Most of those hotels have air conditioners.
Mm-hmm.
That big hunk of metal, right? That's inside the room. If you have to do anything administratively to your firearm, right? That is generally a safe place, to point the firearm. If you have to do something administratively to it. Think about your home, right? Think about, if, if this firearm were to, if I were to negligently press the trigger on this firearm, if this firearm were to go off, what is the area of least consequence? Mm-hmm. What is going to cause the least amount of damage, the least amount of, legal, financial issues if this firearm were to negligently go off? And it's negligence, right?
Right.
It's not just, I had an accident. No, it's negligence. Right. Like you did something that caused that firearm to go off. It just didn't spontaneously fire.
Right. So, and it's going to differ in different houses, different types of houses. I mean, I grew up in tornado bullets, and those things have, paper walls. It's really hard to find a safe direction in some of those trailers and stuff, modular homes and that sort of thing. If you live in a brick home, pretty much every wall is a sufficient backstop. So really what you're looking for is a sufficient backstop, something that's going to stop a projectile. Yep. And that takes a level of competence. You have to know what your gun is going to penetrate through, or what your projectile is going to penetrate through, and the potential hazards there. So I mentioned, modular homes and that type of thing with, more thin walls and stuff, with the potential of a projectile going through drywall and out the siding of the house is pretty high. I generally tell our students a safer area is the corners of the house, because it's generally reinforced with several 2x4s.
Right, multiple layers of wood.
Exactly.
Right.
So then there's a lesser probability of the projectile actually going through that.
Yeah. Large appliances, that's refrigerators, things like that. They're generally a good idea. In my home, I have fireplaces, so I use a fireplace as my dry firing area, right? So or my administrative handling area. In my safe area, where I keep some of my firearms. I have a large fireplace, so right. It's very convenient. Just worked out that way, that I have a nice place where I know that if something were to negligently happen, not that it will, but not if the worst negligence that occurred, it's going to shoot right into that brick. Nothing's going to happen. I'm going to have to change my pants, but aside from that, right, we'll be good to go. All right.
So another one is know your target and what lies beyond, and that's going to apply on a range. It's also going to apply in reality and that type of thing too. And there's a lot that can go into that as well. I think we have a break coming up.
Yep. So something else that that we should consider. These firearm safety rules, they apply everywhere. They don't just apply on the range. They apply when we're with our families, when we're out in public, they're lifestyle rules. So when we come back from the break, we're going to be discussing how to be a responsibly armed citizen and your family, and how those can coincide. You're joining us on the Rack Show on WSIC. We'll be back soon. Stay tuned with us. just now joining us, you're joining the RAC show, the Responsibly Armed Citizen show. I'm your host, Frank Corbath. Here also with me is Tim Kelly, and we are talking about firearms and the family, how they can coincide, how they're intermingled. The last segment we talked about firearm safety. We touched on etiquette. What does it look like? What does it look like to be a responsibly armed citizen, and how do you operate in and around your family being a responsibly armed citizen? How do those two worlds coincide? Because when we talk to some moms, right, or we talk to some families, some parents, there's some hesitation there.
Sure.
When do I introduce my kid to guns? Should I introduce my kid to gun? Are they two totally opposite things? In our world, they're not.
Right.
So for me as a parent, I want to expose my children, as early as they're competently able to be exposed, and understand that firearms no different than a hammer, right? No different than a drill, right? These are all tools that have a very specific purpose, and safety precautions abound, right? Safety precautions, you have to have safety precautions just like you would with any other tool. Than you do with your firearm. So, Tim, let's expand a little bit more on that.
Well, there's so much, and there's so much that goes into the everyday armed citizen's lifestyle, and so many different considerations. As you said, everybody has different hesitations for realistic reasons too, and some of them may not know how to actually go about doing it. I think we should probably start with storage. I think that's probably the best way to go about. How are you storing your handgun that you plan to carry on an everyday basis? Does your employer allow you? Does he permit you to carry a firearm at work and stuff like that? Or do I have to have some other type of storage option in my vehicle? And what kind of storage options should I use? That type of thing. So, for me, I use a company called Vault-Tec USA, and I have I forget the actual name. I'll find it here in a minute. But we have a rather large safe where my wife and I are able to take our entire firearm setup, like the holster and gun and everything.
Yep.
It all comes off at the same time, and we put the whole thing inside of this locked case, this little vault.
Right.
And that's where it stays. Now, before I go any further, the importance of this is I can take my whole holster and my whole holstered gun and put it inside this box. That means I don't have to worry about unnecessary administrative handling of my firearm. Right. Taking my gun out, unloading it, and removing the round from the chamber and that type of thing, which leads to a whole bunch of other complications and issues with your carry ammo when you do that over and over. So being able to just take the whole thing off, put it away, and in the morning just do the process in reverse. As you get dressed, you take it out of the storage and put it on your person, and you go on about your life.
Right.
Now, having another storage option inside your vehicle, should you have to go inside the courthouse, or if your work doesn't permit carrying a handgun or something along those lines, it is also reasonable. And the same company offers some of those. I know Stopbox USA is another really good option, but there's gun safes galore all over the interweb. I mean, you can find options. And storage should be one of the first areas you look when you decide to carry.
Yeah, I completely agree. And for a number of different reasons, right? Obviously safety, right? We want to make sure that unauthorized persons don't have access to firearms, especially other family members, children. It's easy for you to say, oh well, my kids, they're not gonna, they know not to do this, but neighbors' kids don't, not necessarily, right? And friends don't, but regardless. Kids should not have, unauthorized access. I mean, there's literally a statute for that. Kids should not have unauthorized access to firearms. Other family members shouldn't have access to your firearms unless explicit permission is given.
Yeah, but I mean, and it's not just kids either. I mean, we're talking about unauthorized people. That includes criminals. That includes someone breaking into your house while you're away on vacation because they know you carry guns. Right. They know you carry guns because you have Glock stickers all over the back of your windshield or back of your car, and that type of thing.
Hey, so come rob me.
Yeah, exactly. So they're going to basically go inside your house, and if you've just got a gun laying out in the open, it's easier for them to just grab it and, do something with it.
Right.
So let's look at the alternatives. If you don't lock up your firearms, what you have to deal with. I talked to, we just went to the North Carolina Homeschooling Convention, this Thrive Homeschooling Conference or something like that. I can't remember the actual title of it. It was fantastic, man. There were so many awesome families there.
Oh yeah, it was great. Like being able to, and we were hesitant going into that, right? So there's definitely some nerves because when you start talking about families and firearms, like immediately you get that knee jerk reaction of, oh, they don't mix. No, that's a no. Like that doesn't work. But in our world, like what we see from our world's point of view, like they're gonna collide.
Yeah.
Right. And we want to be able to control in an organized, controlled manner, control that exposure. We don't want, I don't want as a parent, I don't want my child's first exposure to a firearm, first exposure to, that world to be at a friend's house, at a neighbor's house, right, where I have no control. Like I have no ability to be able to dictate, those terms.
Yeah, I totally expected a lot more turbulence while we were there. I expected some parents to be like completely standoffish. I don't want to talk to you because guns don't belong around kids and that type of thing. But as you said, man, and this is the world we live in. It doesn't matter if you believe in guns. At the end of the day, it does not matter if you agree with this or not. It doesn't matter if you want to if you choose to carry a gun. It doesn't matter if you're a pacifist. It does not matter. What matters is that guns exist. Right. Guns will always exist. Dangerous tools will always exist. And if we do not educate ourselves first, we won't have a way to educate our kids.
Right.
And so then we have to rely on, as you said, our kids walking into a friend's house or something like that, and that child maybe hasn't been educated the same way that you educated yours.
Right.
Are you going to rely on their first exposure to firearms to be, little Tommy showing, little Bobby his daddy's revolver that he keeps tucked away in his sock drawer?
Right.
Like, is that where you want your first exposure to be?
No, absolutely not.
No, it's not. You want to make sure that you're putting preventative measures in place to keep them safe.
Right.
And so it doesn't matter. It does not matter if you like guns or not. What matters is guns exist, and you need to be able to educate yourself so you can educate your kids.
Right.
And that's really what matters. The homeschooling conference was fantastic though, because you're dealing with a lot of parents that want to grow their own. Essentially,
right.
They want to be the educators in the household, and I respect that. I mean, I think that's fantastic. They should be parenting. They should be raising their kids.
They should be relying on somebody else to do that.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So I guess the idea or the concepts that we had brought to their attention, it resonated with them.
Right.
And so we had a lot of really good feedback there. A lot of good feedback.
Yeah. And excuse me. And going along with that, there's so much, there's so many questions, right, that we get as far as, well, when do I start doing that? And when should I start exposing my family to, firearms and things like that? And the answer I've always given is it depends, and as early as possible. Right. So, so for me in my home, again, I help instruct, right? I teach firearms. I both my family and both my wife and I carry on a regular basis. Like it is part of our lifestyle, and because of that, we knew that from a very early age, my kids needed to have some sort of exposure. Now, I'm not saying that we're leaving firearms out or anything like that, but we're going to the point of leaving dummy guns, right? Mm-hmm. Completely inert pieces of rubber around the home as early as my kids could walk. And so, my daughter's name's Harper, and my son is Max. If we would leave these little dummy guns around the house, Harper would go, oh, daddy, gun, right? Like, go get a parent, go get an adult. She would see that. She would associate that with, I need to go get an adult now. I don't need to touch it. I need to stay away from it. Go right now and go get an adult.
Sure.
Again, not that you would ever be that negligent, but that initial, starting to associate them with You know, it's a tool. It's a tool that shouldn't. It's in a place that it shouldn't be. Let me go get mommy or daddy. Let me go get my parents. Let me go get an adult so that they can take care of this right now.
Right.
And that started really early. Like I said, 2, 3 years old. That's what we did in my home, and it's worked out very well. And then as they got a little bit older, right, we started to introduce, the fundamental firearm safety rules, right? So as my children were able to, comprehend a little bit better, they're able to say, okay, well, what are firearm safety rules? Cool, and it's just a conversation, right?
Sure.
I'm not actually putting a gun in their hand necessarily, but what I'm doing is I'm having a conversation with them, and I'm taking the curiosity out of it.
Sure.
Right? So if they're curious, if they're saying things like, "Oh, well, what is that?" Like, what, I don't want it to be a mystery. Sure. I want them to ask those questions. I want to push and say, "Hey, yeah, what else do you have? Like, what can you tell me? What do you think about this?" Right? I'm exploring that natural curiosity.
You want them to ask you questions because you have the answers to them. And I think that's where a lot of people get hung up. Like, when should I educate my kids? Well, if you're educated yourself, you'd know when.
Right.
I know exactly when to start educating my kids. You said as early on as possible. Same with me, man. But that's because I know what I'm doing.
Right.
Like, I know what I'm doing, and I've measured that to a pretty high level of success.
Right.
A lot of parents haven't taken even the basic level firearms handling safety course, right? Pistol 1 or something like that.
Understand just nomenclature, like the ABCs.
Right. Right. So if you don't have a formal level of education in the subject, why are you teaching your kid?
Right.
Why? I'm not going to, if my kid is expected to learn physics, right, and I didn't pass high school algebra, why would I be trying to teach my kid physics? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Right. So the same thing applies here. It's the same type of education. You need to educate yourself first so that you can properly educate your kid. If you don't want to dive into the go fast, shoot 'em up classes and stuff like that, that's perfectly fine.
The John Wick classes.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But I mean, like services like what we provide, the boutique stuff, man, there is an awesome opportunity there for you to help, learn to educate yourself and educate your kids.
Tell you what, Tim, that sounds like an absolutely fantastic talk. We're going to cut for a break here soon. Immediately after the break, let's talk about that. Let's talk about private sessions. Let's break those down a little bit. What do we learn? What do we do? You're listening to The Rack Show on WSIC. Stay tuned. We'll be back soon. Ladies and gentlemen of the listening audience, welcome back to The Rack Show, where you're joined by Tim Kelly and Frank Horvath. We talk about all things needed for the responsibly armed citizen. We're going to continue our conversation, right? So we talked about safety. We talked about family. Let's talk about, where do we start to learn some of these firearm safety skills, these etiquette skills, how to operate in and around a family. What does a private one-on-one session look like at Apache, and how would that benefit us as being responsibly armed citizens?
Okay, cool. So our business is structured a lot like a gym with a private trainer, where folks come out and they attend a 1 hour block of instruction or a 2 hour block of instruction, where the trainer meets that student where they are, helps them establish goals, and helps them meet those goals along the way. So that boutique experience allows them an opportunity to get to know a professional, get to know somebody that can help customize their needs, right? With within like the responsibly armed citizen criterion, right?
Right.
So if I've got a single mother of two kids, one's two toddlers, we'll say, right, and she says, "Listen, I feel like I really need to take on the responsibility of protecting myself and my family.
Right.
I'm interested in carrying a handgun, but I don't know how to keep it around the house, at home, and stuff. I don't know how to manage that." And that's where we could start off with them, right? We start everybody off with safety and etiquette. So when they get involved in a private session, they start talking about how to safely handle their firearm around the home.
Yeah. And often, like, that mother, right? She already had a plan. She had an idea. She knew what her expectations were. She knew what she wanted, what goals she had.
Right.
Often that's something that you should develop, right? You should say, "Hey, my goal is to blank," right? My goal is to become a responsible armed citizen. My goal is to protect my family. My goal is to XYZ. And if you can come to us with that goal already in mind, then that helps just speed up the process.
Sure.
So if you already have a plan, you already say, "This is what I would like to do," then we can say, "Fantastic. This is how we're going to start. This is point A." Often, when we do those private sessions, the first private session is usually about 2 hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we say, "Hey, in the first hour or so is, let's sit down, let's lay out the foundation. Let's go, what are your goals? What experience do you have? What are your expectations? These are our expectations. Where are you currently on the spectrum of learning? Like, so how much bad habits do we have to break you of, right? So, like, what else is out there that we should know, and how should we approach it so that we can tailor, right, your learning, like tailor your development with firearms safety, firearms etiquette, firearms in general, right, of how to become a responsible armed citizen. So we can tailor that program directly to you.
Right.
And again, that starts with the conversation.
Right.
We're not immediately going and slinging lead. Like, we're starting off very low key, saying, "Hey, who are you? Tell me what you want. Tell me what your goals are, and then what can we do to help you accomplish those goals?"
Right. So, I mean, if you look at, what I compared it to, a gym with a private trainer, you don't walk into a gym and all of a sudden just know how to handle every piece of equipment there.
Right.
A lot of times you're like, "Man, I'm plateauing, or I'm getting stuck on this one piece, or I have no idea what I'm doing here. I just need some help. I need some guidance."
What do I do with my hands?
Yeah.
Right.
So you get you get a private trainer, and you say, "Listen, this is what I'm trying to achieve, and I need to know how to actually, have good form on my bench press," or something along those lines. Okay, cool. Well, that trainer's going to meet you right there, and he's going to help guide you along. But their job isn't to hold your hand throughout the entire process. Their job's to show you how to do it, and get you to a level to where you can go and practice it on your own.
You have a level of proficiency.
Exactly.
Right.
And so, and have a measurement for success. Ours is structured the same way. Where, when folks come to us and say, "I have no idea," or one of the more common ones, to our viewers' surprise, I'm sure, one of the more common ones is, "I hate guns,"
Yep.
or "I don't know, I'm scared to death of them." Right. One of those two things. Those are very, very common student types. And they say, I'm afraid of guns, but I know in the world that we live in right now, I need to have a tool that I can use to protect myself." Well, how do you deal with somebody that is afraid of guns? Well, you work through their issues as far as, well, why are you afraid of guns?
Right.
Was it a traumatic event that occurred when you were a kid? How can we help work you through that? How can we, help to show you that this is nothing more than, another tool, a chainsaw or a hammer or, or a drill or something along those lines, and kind of, restructure in their minds what these firearms actually represent. And, especially for the father or the mother, that comes to us with those types of issues, they can then take that knowledge home and help better educate their families, right? They can help better educate their kids, and help show them from experience, like this is what these guns are capable of, but in the right hands, they're a great tool. They're an excellent resource for your own self-preservation.
Yeah, and that's what it is, right? It is a tool,
right?
I absolutely can understand, and in some ways I can relate to the fear, right, that can be associated with firearms. There is a negative stigma that is there, right? Let's face it. The media does a fantastic job of that, but at the end of the day, it is just that. It is a tool. It is no different than a hammer. It's no different than a nail gun. It is a tool that has been designed and operate with a very specific purpose, right? And in our case, with lethal force, it is to stop a threat, right? We have an issue. It comes to the point where legally it would be justified. It is to stop a threat, far too often. When we go down these rabbit holes of, we're scared of guns, or, we have, XYZ issues, the issue always comes back to, or the common, the common statement is, well, guns kill people. Like but that's not true. It's really not. Firearms are a means, just like a hammer is a means, right? You can do you can accomplish the same end goal with a hammer than you can with a firearm. It's just, it's a force multiplier.
Right. So one of the ways we try to get this around to students is talking about etiquette, and the difference between firearm safety and firearms etiquette. And I'm a firm believer that people need to understand the difference, and that should be included in their education, right? And the process of that. A lot of times people get wrapped up around the firearms handling safety rules, and what it ends up causing is this unnecessary fear of an inanimate object, right? So one of the things I like to do is I'll take a semi-automatic handgun, right? I'll remove the magazine from it. I'll lock the slide back. I'll check the chamber, make sure that I'll check and double check, make sure there's no possible way that there is a round anywhere close to this gun. I'll leave the slide locked back to the rear and set it on the table with the muzzle pointed downrange and the student standing behind it. And I'll ask the student, if I'm not going to do it, but if I were to pick this up in its current condition and point it at you, what emotion would you feel? Right. And the most common response is, I'd feel fear. Why? If you know for a fact, you've checked it, I've checked it, everybody's checked it, it is completely empty, why do you feel the emotion of fear? Well, because you're not supposed to. Well, that little stumble and stutter generally tells me that they don't really know why you're not supposed to point guns at people. Right. So, but they'll say, but you're not supposed to point it at anything. You're supposed to, anything you don't want to shoot, kill, or destroy, or because you're supposed to treat every gun as if it were loaded. That's why. But why? Well, it is absolutely unnecessary for you to assume that this is dangerous. Pointing a completely unloaded and inert firearm at you, you should feel an emotion, but it shouldn't be fear. Right. It should be, I'm offended. Yeah. No different than me flipping you the bird. That's right. Right? Or picking my nose in public.
I get mad.
Right. Yeah.
Like instant.
Yeah. Yeah. So it certainly is worthy of correction, because bad etiquette can lead to unsafe behavior. Right. But being able to bridge that gap between firearm safety and firearms etiquette, the folks that are afraid of firearms start to understand, oh, so it's not the gun that's the problem, right? And these guns can't just magically hurt me just because they're guns. They have to have some type of fuel, right? They have to be able to operate. And once they see that it's another mechanical object that, has to go through a process in order for it to work, just like a chainsaw's got to have gas and a chain. right? A chainsaw is only dangerous if it's turned on, right? If it's running and there's a chain attached to it. It's the only time that it can really seriously harm you.
Right.
If it's not running and it's just sitting on the table, there's no reason to like run away from it because you're scared it's going to jump up and, Texas Chainsaw Massacre you.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So I think that right there, bridging the gap between firearm safety and firearms etiquette is one of the best ways we found to be able to get people past some of their previous fears of firearms, or getting past some of that trauma that they've developed as a child.
The hesitancy,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, and then being able to build off that, right? So being able to go, hey, all right, so I don't want to say we've conquered the field, but we've made significant strides in being able to, get past the fear.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's just baby steps. It's going, all right, cool. So let's now work on your form. Let's now work on, your accuracy. All right, can you hit an intended target?
Mm-hmm.
Then we'll move on to your precision. Do you know exactly with specificity where you're going to impact that target? And do you mean to impact that target when you intend to? Right.
Right.
So can you hit the center of the center of the center of the center of the X? And then we build off of that. We want to get you to a point where you can operate with automaticity, right? So you don't even have to think about it; it just happens.
Right.
Again, this is part of like that structure, that wax on, wax off approach of can we meet you at, can we push you to your goal? Can we get you to where you want to be as a student? And then once you've hit those goals, what are the next steps? What are the next goals? What are some things that we can continue to push on? It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even as far as like that, the student shows up to the trainer and says, "Hey, this is my new outfit that I'm going to be wearing to work this week. One of my new outfits. What do you think? Do I have, can I conceal really well? And like, how's my level of concealment?" And that's an excellent opportunity to learn about principles of concealment and stuff. Yeah. Different medical considerations, what type of medical gear to carry. I mean, there's just endless opportunity for the responsibly armed citizen there's endless things that they can go over in a private session and really, really benefit them moving forward.
Yeah. Well, Tim, that sounds all amazing. We're going to have to talk a little bit more about private sessions moving up. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Rack Show on WSIC, the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show. We're going to come up for the break. After the break, we're going to be talking about the Competency of the Month. Talk to you soon.
All right, welcome back, everybody. My name is Tim Kelly. You are on the Rack Show, where we talk about everything involving the responsibly armed citizen. With me, I have Frank Horvath, and we are going to be discussing the competency of the month. The last episode, we talked about what our competency of the month and what it actually is. It's essentially a subject that we cover for a period of time to help guide you through certain considerations for the everyday armed citizen. The topic is third-party altercations. We've been talking a lot about family and how that, how firearm safety and etiquette and stuff fits into family. I'd kind of like to talk a little bit about the competency of the month and how third-party altercations can relate to family life.
So yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about that. So I think on our last show, I had said, unless it's me or mine, right, I'm going to be really hesitant to get involved. So talking specifically about family, if I know the scenario, if I know exactly what's happening from the very beginning to the very end, right, as is state law in the state of North Carolina, you can intervene in third-party encounters as long as you can check off the check boxes as far as, was that person that you're intervening for, were they justified to use deadly force on their own behalf? Right. So if I've seen everything from the beginning and if I know the story from beginning in, I know what happened, then absolutely I'm going to intervene as far as me and my immediate family.
Right.
Outside of that, I'm going to be really hesitant. Right. There's so many different things. You don't know what kind of bad blood may have already been there. If it was some sort of neighbor quarrel or, whatever it is, right? The insert issue here. Somebody shot my dog. Well, that doesn't mean that you can do anything, unfortunately, in the state of North Carolina, right? So there's, again, that goes back to the previous conversation of emotion and, getting wrapped up in that. But as far as, me and my family, if I'm seeing an altercation happening with my spouse, right? If I see an altercation that's happening with my children, I'm absolutely going to use all the tools that are in my toolbox to do what I need to do for my family.
That's big talk, Frank. That's big talk. I'm gonna jump in and save the day,
Do
right?
it.
And it's one thing to say that you're going to jump in and save your child's life from, some mugger or something like that, or save your wife's life. When you come out of the grocery store and she was ahead of you and you see her getting mugged or something along those lines.
Right.
It's one thing to say that you're going to intervene. It is another to actually have the means, the tools,
Right.
the knowledge, and the know-how to handle that situation.
Right.
A lot of God, I hate bashing on dudes, but a lot of us have this ego about us that we are our family's protector.
The knight on the white horse.
Yeah,
right?
man, exactly. And it's just not realistic to believe that you're just going to rely on some hormone, right?
Right.
To just activate, and all of a sudden you're going to Hulk smash.
Right.
That's not the way this works.
And it's not always the Hulk smash approach that you have to take,
Right.
but you have to have those different skill sets. You have to have the verbal judo. You have to have the wherewithal. You have to have the presence of mind, the presence of self to be able to identify, oh, this is going bad, and this is going bad very quickly. I need to fix very quickly now. That doesn't always mean that you have to go to deadly force, right? That could mean, I don't like the way that this person is approaching my family, or I don't like the way that this person's approaching us. We're going to pivot hard now, right? And that's a conversation I've already had with my family. We already have a plan. We already know what's happening, all right? And that's something that we've pre-gamed.
Yeah.
So if, I'm not going to share it on air, but, my family and I have a very specific phrase that we use. And when I say this very specific phrase, my family knows something is bad. Something is bad happening now. Candace takes care of the kids, and then I do whatever I need to do in that moment, right? But that's a conversation, and that is a plan that we've already had. That's something that we've already pre-gamed. Call us paranoid. I don't care. In my world, if something were to happen, at least we have a plan.
Right.
If you don't have a plan, then you're trying to figure out things in the moment. If you're trying to figure out things in the moment, there's possibility that emotion's going to get involved, and your mental process is going to be skewed. So again, The going back to what you were saying about the ego and having that like white knight syndrome, whatever it may be. Um, Far too often we hear guys that say things like that, and they don't have the skill set, not just the physical skill set of, we'll say, deadly force, but they don't have all those other soft skills, med, verbal judo, right, hands, body skills, hand skills, things like that, to be able to back up what they're saying or back up what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, another thing is education on like how to deal with people. I think, we live in a society where everybody gets offended by the most minute thing, right? And some people are just downright rude, right? So like I think one of the major complications you run into is maybe your wife's got a mouth on her, right? Maybe she is maybe she's cut somebody off in traffic or something, right? And she cut somebody off in traffic or something, and now she's been confronted, right? And after she's been confronted, she says, a couple of choice words to that person that ends up ramping up and escalating, the issue. So this is a study for the family in itself. Like you have to be prepared for you have to be prepared for the possibility that you might flip somebody's switch, press their button, turn their dial or something that turns them into an absolute monster and somebody that you just didn't expect.
Absolutely.
Right?
Again, I think I had said in the last show that I'm really fascinated by law. I'm really fascinated about, different self-defense scenarios across the world, but primarily here in the United States. Several years ago, I know it hit, the news media wide open, up in Pennsylvania, right? There was a couple that, again, they escalated, right? So they were having these verbal altercations. It was going back and forth. There was a lot of bad blood between the two. But the person who lived across the street that this couple were arguing with, they said the couple said the wrong thing at the wrong time, right? And this person just flipped. Right. And because of that current mental state, because of what happened and the words that happened and all the bad blood that happened prior, this person used a deadly force against this couple, just in cold blood, just murdered them. Yeah. Over nothing. It was literally over nothing. So like you just don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't have the foresight of knowing what's in the other person's mind. You can say the wrong thing at the wrong time, but that's why it's ever so important to understand de-escalation tactics, right? Understand what that verbal judo, right? What can you say? How can you say it? What can you do to make yourself less threatening? What can you do to really back down and to stop the altercation from ramping up? Because that's ultimately what we want to do. We don't want to use deadly force. We don't want it to get anywhere close to that. Right? We want to do everything that we can to mitigate that. Right.
If you look at the probabilities of third-party altercations actually de-escalating, or escalating, it's when a third party gets involved.
Right.
So if there's one-on-one, the probability of somebody just submitting and saying, look, you know what, you're right, I cut you off, sorry about that, man, you know what, here's $20, and I'm sorry for the inconvenience, have a nice day, and just turn around and leaving.
Right.
But if the wife is trying to do that, to the pissed off guy who's mad that she cut her off, that she cut him off, if she's trying to do that, and meanwhile in walks big chest husband, what are you doing talking to my wife like that, or something like that? Well, all of a sudden everything goes up.
Escalation, right?
Yeah, and now it's wife trying to be mediator, husband trying to be He-Man, and you've got all kinds of chaos happening, right? But if the husband knew that his wife was capable of handling such an event, he could be standing by.
Absolutely.
Right? He could be standing by and taking care of other things, like taking care of the kids, right? Or taking care of whatever, just taking care of maybe call it an advantageous position, right? Positioning themselves in the event he decides to, increase his, his anger and go to something more physical, then you are in a position to be able to do something about it. Doing that really helps keep that situation from escalating further, right? So yeah, I think when you're looking at the probabilities, that the minute you insert yourself in someone else's business, even if it is your family member or something, the
Right.
person that you're riding in the car with, right? The minute you insert yourself, the probability of this turning physical is gone up
Right.
a lot.
Tim, I think that's all that we have for today. Thank you so very much for talking a little bit about just everything, right? Talking about safety, talking about families, talking about private sessions. Something that we forgot to do on our last episode that was made apparently clear to us is we talked about Apache, but we gave you no information, no details about about how to contact us.
Oh
right?
my
How can you
gosh.
reach out and talk to
How
us?
do we do
How
that?
can we go? So Tim, quickly, only have about a minute and change. Give me some details about Apache. So website, social media, phone numbers. How can people reach out to Apache? How can they get some private training? How can they reach out and get some resources?
Okay, so one of the best ways to do it is go to our website, ApacheNC.com. That's APACHENC as in North Carolina.com. And all of our contact information is on there. But if you ever just want to send us an email or something like that, maybe you got some ideas of what you want to hear us talk about on the show, info@ApacheNC.com is the best way to contact us. You can also give us a phone call at 336-422-6859. We can get you set up with a private session or get you into our next class. We do a lot more than just concealed carry classes, folks. We have a lot of other fantastic options for you. We do a lot more than just pistol work. Just get in contact with us. You can also follow us on Facebook or Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content like you've been hearing today.
Thank you, Tim. Guys, you've been listening to The Rack Show, the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show, hosted by WSIC, where your news matters. We really thank everyone that's at WSIC. They've done a fantastic job. Tune in next Saturday at 1 o'clock to hear more, and we'll be seeing you. Stay safe.